Big tech is on trial. Regulators say Google and Facebook are monopolies and want to break them up. So, what's at stake here for all of us?
This is going to maybe sound a little grandiose, but honestly, I think the future of the internet is at stake. I think we've seen a world in which for the past 20 years, you've basically had one company controlling search. That's kind of the way we acquire our information. And for the past almost 20 years, we've had one company control most of our social networking, the way we interact with people.
What would more competition mean for how we interact with people and information? We could soon find out. Hi, I'm Paul Haavardsrud. Welcome to The Cost of Living. We're learning a lot from tech titans like Mark Zuckerberg taking the stand. Before buying Instagram, he wrote an email saying it's better to buy than compete. Not a great look when you're being accused of stifling competition. But could these trials really change how we use the internet? Also today, a funny thing happened on the way to boycotting fur. Mink coats are making a comeback? Up first, the tariff hokey pokey. You put your tariff in, you take your tariff out, you put your counter-tariff in, and you shake it all about. What comes next? Well, we're living it. All the toing and froing on tariffs can be tough to follow. What's on, what's off, what's on pause. And then there's Canada's counter-tariffs. We've put our own retaliatory tariffs on about $60 billion worth of stuff that we import from the U.S. This is us clapping back for the steel and aluminum tariffs that Trump put on at the start of this whole thing. How is this supposed to work, and what exactly are we going after? Blair Sanderson, counter-tariffs. Let's go to the list.
Let's go through it. It's a very long list with nearly 2,000 entries, and it's a pretty eclectic basket of goods: shaving cream, life jackets, bread makers, horse saddles.
That does seem pretty random.
Yeah, it can seem that way. Overall, what Ottawa's trying to do is make U.S. goods more expensive for Canadians, right? So we'll stop buying them. But why do they pick this item and not that one? To try to figure this all out, I went to a bowling alley in Halifax.
Well, bowling, naturally.
It's where you find, answers to life's most important questions. Doug Blackler works there. He's in charge of maintenance.
This is where the machines are. This is basically the down back area, we call it.
The down back area.
The down back area, yeah. This is forbidden. No bowlers can ever come back here.
So this was a thrill for me. I've always wanted to know what goes on behind the pins. There's all kinds of spinning wheels and pulleys. And as it turns out, a lot of bowling stuff is affected by Canada's counter-tariffs. Most of the balls, for instance, are made in the U.S.
We do carry bowling balls for people if they want to buy a set.
$319.
Yeah, that's for 4 of them. That's not per.
But tariffs make that $319 more like $400.
Yeah, that's an extra 25% right on top of the retail price.
But a big question for him is, will his customers pay more? Like in economics, they call this demand elasticity. If bowlers really want a new ball, they're stuck, they got no other options, so they'll pay. But if they really don't care that much about bowling, they just won't buy the ball.
Yeah, and this economic theory is now coming to life for bowling balls and for those further up the bowling equipment food chain. Art McKee helps run Canada's largest bowling equipment supplier. It's called Bufa, based in Quebec.
Bowling is our business. Basically, every form of bowling there is, we have something to do with it.
And now his business is really wrapped up in the tariff war.
Yeah, and he actually did his own research to try to figure out, why bowling. He looked to see what other sports are on the counter-tariff list, and he pointed out to me that golf clubs are but baseball bats are not. I asked the federal government about this. It responded saying it won't talk about specific products. Instead, it says that goods are chosen to, quote, maximize pressure on the U.S. administration. So in this case, U.S.-made bowling balls are mostly produced in Wisconsin, Utah, and Michigan, and all three of those states voted for Trump in the last election.
So hit Republican states and hope Trump's supporters then put pressure on the White House. He'll listen to them and back down on tariffs.
Yeah, exactly. But that really is only part of the story. You know, the government says it's also trying to minimize the impact counter-tariffs are having on Canadians. And one way to do that is by targeting goods we can source from other countries, like bowling balls. Equipment distributor Art McKee says there is one company, Brunswick, that manufactures its balls in Mexico.
Our price on bowling balls from Brunswick will not be affected because even though they go into a truck and go through the states to get to us, the truck doesn't stop. It doesn't get opened in the states, so it's not subject to tariff.
What about buying Canadian? Is that an option here? Does anyone in Canada make bowling balls?
You know, there is actually one small company in Kitchener that makes 5-pin balls, but no one makes 10-pin balls. It's a good question, though, because Ottawa is looking to apply counter-tariffs in spots where we do have homegrown options. You know, when you look at the counter-tariff list in this way, the randomness of the list can start to make more sense.
Well, how so exactly?
We'll take toilet seats, for example. We have a Canadian toilet seat maker. It's called Centoco. It's got a plant in Windsor, Ontario. So putting counter-tariffs on toilet seats could also come with the added bonus of helping out Windsor.
And that is a bonus because Windsor, it's obviously a border town. It's kind of on the front lines of all this. You know, but when you step back, Blair, this is really where tariffs turn into a slippery slope for any country because the U.S., they go all protectionist. They try to help out their industries. But then when we retaliate, we try to shelter our own industries. You know, we just keep reinforcing this. It's like rinse and repeat, more tariffs, more protectionism, on and on.
Yeah, we're basically responding with a page right out of Trump's playbook. He's trying to boost U.S. manufacturing with tariffs, so we do the same, just with a different set of products. I did talk to an international trade lawyer about this, Lawrence Herman. He says tariffing things like toilet seats in response does make sense. And in fact, we could see more Canadian toilet seats on local shelves.
A company like, say, Home Depot or Canadian Tire, instead of bringing in U.S. Toilet seats and paying the duties, will purchase Canadian-made toilet seats. So that is another aspect of these so-called retaliatory tariffs.
So are counter-tariffs seemingly random, but actually pretty strategic.
But the strategy isn't always clear to everyone. I dropped into a gun range in Truro, Nova Scotia, where people are not really sure why their bullets are being tariffed. You can basically only buy them from the U.S. There are no Canadian alternatives. Kirk Saint is the range's safety guy.
This ammunition, so it's 9mm.
How much for that pack of bullets?
$29.99.
$30.
$30.
So what do you reckon that's going to go up if you put the 25% tariff on it?
Well, you're going to be pushing $40. So it's gonna make a change as to how much people shoot.
Now, Kirk hasn't jacked up the price yet. When they heard the tariffs were coming, they loaded up with a big order. But when that inventory runs out, Kirk says their customers are going to feel it.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that they're probably not feeling great about that.
No, it's frustrating for Kirk. Like I said earlier, the government won't talk about specific items. But Lawrence Herman says it's obvious why Ottawa is aiming its tariffs at gun makers.
They are among the groups that are the strongest supporters of MAGA and the Trump approach to the world. And so targeting any interest group that is so connected to Trump is the right strategic approach by Canada.
And that's how bullets get swept up in this larger fight.
Looks that way. Again, not super comforting to Kirk at the gun range, who is caught up in all of this. Inventory is running low, and he's got customers looking ahead to the hunting season.
And hunting bullets are significantly more. One popular one for hunting is the 6.5 Creedmoor. We're out completely.
So should wild game be breathing a sigh of relief right now?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you know, they say no one wins a trade war, but one group that might disagree, the deer.
Right, but the losers, hunters. As for Kirk, he's holding off on putting a new order for guns and bullets, hoping these counter-tariffs might be dropped soon. After all, we've seen the Trump administration remove tariffs on other countries, so maybe the same thing will happen to the tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. And if that happens, of course, we'll likely drop our counter-tariffs as well.
Well, that is one way things could go, but we also now have Trump. He's back to talking more about increasing auto tariffs. And we know Ottawa has a full list of counter tariffs that covers $155 billion in U.S. imports. So far, we're only at $60 billion.
Yep, there's room for a lot more products to be added to the list.
All right. Thanks, Blair.
You're welcome.
This is The Cost of Living. Listen to us on CBC Radio 1 and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Paul Haavardsrud. Fashion is cyclical. Scrunchies are back. They're gone. They're back again, but just ironically. Even more complicated? Fur. Like a chinchilla coat. After decades of almost being canceled, protests, red paint, can fur really be making a comeback?
Mina Eli grew up in Toronto, admiring her mother's fur coats.
I'm Eastern European background, like I'm Jewish Russian. So for my mom, she had a couple of them, and I would always remember when they would go out or when they would go to shul, it was just something they would wear. It was because you had to walk to shul, right?
Those coats were warm. And to Mina, they were the height of style.
I just loved it. I loved the way it looked. I loved the way the woman looked in it. It just symbolized so much like elegance and, just richness.
Today, Mina designs fur coats for the luxury brand Arpino. And lately, business has been good.
Fashion's a cycle. So it went out for a little bit and then it came back. And then once you started seeing celebrities endorsing it and wearing it, that opened a little bit of a door of like, hey, this is okay.
Celebrities like Rihanna and Kylie Jenner have been photographed wearing furs. And then there's last year's mob wife aesthetic.
Think big fur coats paired with some knee-high boots.
It's about big hair, all black outfits, maybe add some leopard. Red lips, red...
Mark Downey runs the Fur Harvesters auction in North Bay, Ontario. It's the only wild fur auction house in North America. It sells to buyers from all over the world. Mark says he first noticed a change a couple of years ago.
Turkey, China, any of these places that want to attend our auction have to call here and ask for what's called a letter of invitation. The amount of letters of invitation we were getting requested for was like every week they were coming in. It was just like, what's going on? It doesn't, none of this makes sense.
Since then, prices have nearly doubled for species like sable and lynx, and the furs have been flying out the door.
The demand for the last 2 years has been growing to the point where we're sold out. Brokers and manufacturers are coming here needing to buy 20,000 skins, and they leave with 5. And they got to come back the next sale and buy again.
So why, after years of protests and PETA campaigns, is real fur making a comeback? Fashion writer Leah Van Loon says it comes down to shifting priorities. Today's buyers care about sustainability, and real fur is real. Fake fur is plastic.
When you have an entire coat made to look like a fur coat that now is going to sit in the landfill forever, I think that's an important consideration.
Especially for Gen Zs, who are more likely to buy secondhand. If you're lucky, Leah says, you can still find an old fur coat for cheap. And ethically, it's a little easier to swallow.
I wear vintage fur because those animals would have been dead a long time ago, with or without me wearing this coat.
But Leah says wearing real fur is also about attitude. One that mirrors the prevailing political winds.
Now, with sort of the degradation of certain institutions in the United States, I think we're seeing the trends move towards a more moneyed lifestyle, let's say. So fur is a really quick indicator, like it's a fast read. You're wearing a fur coat, you look rich.
One American trend spotter calls this new vibe shift boom boom. A kind of greed is good style that takes its cues from the 1980s. Or as fur designer Mina Eli puts it,
it's just the statement that you have by saying, I can wear this and I'm confident in wearing it. And I don't give a about what anybody says. That's really the mentality.
For the cost of living, I'm Jennifer Keene.
This is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haavardsrud. Technically, no one owns the internet. It's just a bunch of computers strung together. Practically, how we use the internet runs through a handful of big companies. Now, 2 of them, Google and Facebook, are being sued by the U.S. Justice Department. It argues they own a little too much of the internet, and they want that to stop. John Newman is a law professor at the University of Miami and a former trial attorney with the U.S. Justice Department's antitrust division. He's here to take us through what big tech on trial could mean for us when we're online. John, hi.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. So, you've said these trials could be the most significant 2 weeks in the 135-year history of U.S. antitrust law. Why do you say that?
Well, that's a big claim, but we've got so much going on right now in U.S. antitrust law, all of it focused, as you said, on big tech. And there's never been a period where we've had cases that basically involve products that every single one of us and a good portion of the people around the entire globe use. So these cases just have a reach to them that even though we've had some big cases in the past, Standard Oil, AT&T, that sort of thing, we've never had anything that affects us on a day-to-day basis quite like this.
Okay, so we've got Google, we've got Facebook. They're being tried separately. If we just look at Facebook for a second, what's the argument here?
This case is at its core about Facebook owning Instagram and owning WhatsApp. So the basic theory of the case is that Facebook saw Instagram as an existing rising threat and bought them to neutralize that threat, and saw WhatsApp as a potential threat, that WhatsApp had this huge user base, right? 1 billion users around the world. It wouldn't be that hard in Facebook's view, according to the FTC, for WhatsApp to pivot into social. And if it did, it would pose a pretty serious threat to Facebook's dominance. So the FTC says Facebook bought WhatsApp to stop that potential threat.
Well, you use the word dominance. If you think about Facebook or Meta, just what is its dominance when it comes to our online world?
Well, it's a little bit unusual, right? Our monopolies in the past, again, Standard Oil, even Microsoft, we're more used to them charging high prices, and that's kind of the evidence. We all feel that pinch when we, in years past, went to the pump and paid Standard Oil's monopoly tax. It's a little bit less intuitive when we talk about a company like Facebook, but what they charge is what some people call the time tax. So Facebook, because it owns Instagram, because it owns WhatsApp, is able to really monopolize our time, monopolize our attention. And among other things, I think the FTC has evidence that Facebook has been jamming more ads down our eyeballs than they should be able to in a competitive market. So they are a monopoly. They're a monopoly of time and attention, and to some extent our privacy as well. So we feel it a little differently, but I think it's still really important, even if it's not a monetary harm.
If we think about Facebook being all together as it is now, one company with Instagram and WhatsApp, it feels very concentrated. What does that kind of size and reach allow Facebook to do?
Well, among other things, in the past, it's allowed Facebook to either copy a new feature that a promising young startup is trying to get off the ground, and then basically squelch that startup before it has a chance to really gain traction. It also allows Facebook to just enjoy this kind of kill zone around Facebook, right? So there just hasn't been as much innovative startup activity in personal social networking as we might expect to see. And that's because people rightly look at the world and say, Facebook's got this huge entrenched lead. We're just never going to be able to make a go of it. So we've seen, I think, less innovation in this space than we should.
If we think about Instagram getting sold off, if that's how things go, what could an independent Instagram, say, mean for social media competition?
Well, among other things, it might mean that Instagram is really fully unleashed to go directly head-to-head against Facebook. And one of the, I think, fascinating things that's emerged during this trial is that Facebook was intentionally kind of hobbling Instagram, right? They were starving it of engineers. They weren't supporting it the way they should have been. And that's because Mark, at least according to Instagram's co-founder, Mark Zuckerberg had a kind of emotional attachment to Facebook. It's his baby. It's the one he started. So when push came to shove, he would support Facebook instead of Instagram. So I think an unleashed free Instagram might, among other things, go head-to-head with Facebook.
That's kind of wild to think about, because if you think about where Facebook generates its cash or where Meta gets a big chunk of its cash, like Instagram is that profitable little hub. And to think that it's maybe not embracing that feels like it actually just goes against how a corporation would operate.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the really interesting pieces of evidence at trial was an internal email from Mark Zuckerberg where he said, maybe we should just spin off Instagram and WhatsApp ourselves. That would, among other things, eliminate this kind of internal conflict of interest we have. He called it the strategy tax. It's like Facebook can't really deploy all the strategies a normal company would because it has all these conflicts of interest because it owns all these companies.
And now you've got regulators saying, hey, we want more competition. We don't want big companies just buying little ones, which brings us to Google, because Google is also on trial right now. What is the concern from regulators about Google's size?
One of the concerns is that Google in online search is dominant, and it is a good search engine, right? Nobody's out here saying Google's a bad search engine. But part of the way that Google has maintained its dominance in search is by basically locking up every path to get your product that would compete with Google in front of users. So if you open up your Android phone, Google's the default search engine. If you open up Mozilla Firefox, a web browser, Google's the default search engine. The case centers on the fact that none of that's by accident. Google's actually been consciously paying for exclusivity across a bunch of distribution channels.
And it seems like some of the core legal principles here in the Google case are the same as the Facebook case. It's about competition or a lack thereof. What is the effect of less competition on the internet?
Well, when it comes to search, I think we are at another one of those really interesting strategic inflection points, right? We've all done internet search for basically the same way for about 20 years, but all of a sudden we're seeing the rise of things like query-based artificial intelligence applications. It's a different way of providing information in response to a user's query. If Google is allowed to continue to control the apps that can get in front of users, I think we'll probably see a world that kind of looks like the world that Google wants, a world that doesn't look that much different than the past 20 years. If that space is opened up, I think we could see the rise of some really interesting new, especially artificial intelligence-based technologies. We've already heard from some Gen AI companies that they would be interested in buying Chrome. Okay, why is that? Well, Chrome is a pretty significant way that people interact with search engines right now, right? It accounts for a pretty big percentage of the way that people run searches. I'm going to bet that if a young upstart AI company controls Chrome, that landing page is going to look a lot different. It might not be a rectangular search bar, right? It might be an AI app interface, right? And instead of just a normal 10 blue links search result, when you type something into its interface, it might give you a kind of an AI created response that incorporates a bunch of different things into it.
What are the stakes here, John, in these two tech giants being on trial for the internet and really for us, because we're online?
Well, this is going to maybe sound a little grandiose, but honestly, I think the future of the internet is at stake. I think we've seen a world in which for the past 20 years, you've basically had one company controlling search. That's kind of the way we acquire information. And for the past almost 20 years, we've had one company control most of our social networking, the way we interact with people. If you can break those open to competition, the way that we interact with information and the way that we interact with people could look radically different. So to me, that's the future of the internet. I think the stakes really couldn't be higher.
And finally, John, anti-monopoly enforcement has seemed to step up in the last few years in the US and in Canada. Do Google, Facebook, these kinds of trials suggest that kind of anti-monopoly vibe might continue under the Trump administration?
It's early days. It's hard to predict with any certainty what's going to happen in U.S. politics these days. But My prediction is the anti-monopoly movement is not going anywhere. I think it's here to stay. I think we've seen a new wave of leadership come in, and they could have gotten rid of all these cases, right? They could have dismissed them. They could have voluntarily settled them. They've done the opposite, right? It seems to be full speed ahead. The Justice Department is still coming out swinging on these Google cases. The FTC is obviously in court right now trying to break up Meta. So I look at all that and I think, at least when it comes to big tech, anti-monopoly is here to stay.
All right. Well, John Newman, thanks for all that.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
John Newman is a law professor at the University of Miami and a former trial attorney with the U.S. Justice Department. On a recent show, we looked at whether Canada should invest in a superstar city, somewhere that would attract a lot of people and take pressure off housing in Toronto and Vancouver. We asked for your picks. You argued for Sudbury, Winnipeg, Brandon, go Bobcats, and these places.
Hi, my name is Casey, and I'm just calling about the superstar city piece to say that I think Kelowna, British Columbia, should be Canada's next superstar city. It's only about a 4-hour drive down multiple great highways to Vancouver. We already have a superstar university in UBC Okanagan. It's a great international airport with room to expand. And really, I think the only thing we'd need is some denser housing and maybe some upgrades to our transit and roads.
Hi, it's Dan Leslie. I'm in Nanaimo, BC. How could you leave out Victoria? Victoria, British Columbia, is no longer just a government city. It's now a major tech hub on the West Coast. And it strikes me that if there was someone with vision that could say, hey, Victoria, instead of building out, you should build up, it could end up being one of the major cities in Canada.
Hello, my name is R.A. Fournier. There was mention of London, there was mention of Kingston. Hamilton is probably your better choice, and this is coming from a gentleman who lives on the shores of Georgian Bay, 200 kilometers away. When you actually think about Hamilton, Ontario, it is surrounded by all the major highways. It has McMaster University, world class. It has large base businesses. Thank you. I enjoy your show.
That is one grudging vote for the Hammer. Thanks to everyone who called. If you hear something on the show and want to give us a call, our number is 1-866-550-COST. That's 1-866-550-2678. Or email costofliving@cbc.ca. The show is based in Calgary. The Cost of Living is produced by Daniel Newman, Blair Sanderson, and Jennifer Keene, with help from Jeff Kynock. I'm Paul Haavardsrud. Thanks for listening.